Although I appreciate the offer. We have file item 5, SB 287, Senator Hueso, on the automated eternal defibrillators.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you very much. SB 287 is modeled after an ordinance that was passed in San Diego when I was a council member there. It would require most newly constructed buildings built after January 2016 to have an automatic external defibrillator. This year, over 350,000 Americans are expected to suffer from sudden cardiac arrest. 9 out of 10 of them will not survive. This bill would require that these defibrillators be placed in high occupancy buildings prospectively well into the future. And I'm asking for your support for this important measure to help increase the possibility of saving lives in California. This bill will save lives. A vote for this bill will be a vote to save the lives of Californians.
Thank you very much. Witnesses?
Johan Claes, representing Paramedics Plus, who is Alameda County's 911 EMS ambulance provider. People who get to these AEDs in a timely manner are able to have a cardiac save rate of over 70%. We support the measure. We donate lots of these to community groups throughout the county.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sean Henschel here on behalf of American Medical Response and support. American Medical Response is California's largest provider of 911 emergency services. We respectfully ask for your aye vote. We commend the author on his leadership on this issue to give a display on how user-friendly these AEDs have become. We have Tori Schnell from AMR. He is a paramedic and training officer.
Alrighty, very briefly, sir, if you would.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Again, Tori Schnell, 20 years of paramedic experience, training officer as well. I'm just going to take you real quick. So it comes with the pads that are they have graphics on that show you proper placement, typically here and here. You turn on the device.
Apply pads to patient's bare chest. Plug-in pads can analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient. Shock advised. Charging. Stay clear of patient. Deliver shock now. Press the orange button. Shock delivered. Begin CPR.
So at that point, you would continue CPR. That beep is for a pacemaker, so you go fast enough, and that's as easy as it is. Thank you.
Well, it seems somewhat easy, but if your adrenaline is rushing and you've got somebody there, I'm not sure we'd all be quite so of our normal mind. If you, right, and if you aren't necessarily speaking the language, it could be a challenge. But thank you for that demonstration. I think that's helpful to all of us. Any other witnesses in support? Are there any witnesses in opposition? If we could let this gentleman step up. Good afternoon.
Madam Chair and members, I'm Matthew Harg with the California Business Properties Association, and it's doubly tough to come before this committee on this bill. First of all, it's always tough to testify on a bill that has just been attested that will save lives. We agree that AEDs can save lives. It's also tough to come before this committee as a non-attorney, so I don't want to get too far into the liability issues, but a big issue with us on this bill, why we oppose it, is that there are some deep liability issues that you know about with this committee. There's been bills in the past that have tried to deal with those, and what this bill does is kind of short circuit those concerns that people who own commercial property have in terms of the state of California's policies on AEDs. As you know, under current law, there's basically 11 things that somebody who puts in an AED needs to do in order to get the limited liability that they currently get under law. This bill basically waves all those to the side and says it doesn't matter. You have to put in an AED in certain new buildings with certain occupancies. Many buildings in the state of California do not have an owner's representative at the property. And in order to get the protections under current law, you have to have somebody sitting at that property who is trained on CPR and trained in the use of AEDs in order for that business owner or the occupant of the building, who many times are not the business owner but they're tenants, in order to get any type of the protections. This bill just pushes all that aside and says you must put this in whether or not you can meet the requirements under statute. We think that this type of bill will, there'll be large corporations, and many of the large buildings that have on-site management every day will be able to meet the qualifications under current statute, and that will be, it'll be fine for those companies. But many of your commercial properties in your districts will not be able to meet the statutory requirements. And you're going to be forcing them to put in something that which could end up that property gets sued if something should go wrong. And then I also apologize, I need to get into code issues really quickly. This bill did not go through a committee that talks about code issues, and I know it'll put all of you to sleep. But the way the bill is written, if it should move forward, we have some suggestions on ways that the committee might want to change the bill in order for it to work better under current codes. The current bill as written has occupancy classifications which are not congruent with current code. They don't work with how the code currently works. The mandate under this bill is currently triggered at an occupancy of 200 or more. That's not something that's currently used with code, that exact language. What we think the bill is getting at is average daily occupancy of 200, but the way the bill is interpreted is a max occupancy of 200. This room would qualify under the bill, except the bill exempts public buildings, which we also find is an issue. We think if the state should move forward and say that this is such an important technology that it must be mandated in private buildings, we think that public buildings should also partake in that mandate also. The San Diego ordinance, which this is modeled after, does include school facilities of 200 or more, and we're not sure why this committee would want to move something forward that parses who has to comply with this legislation based on who pays the mortgage of the building, applies it only to private buildings and not to public buildings. So for those reasons, we must respectfully oppose the bill at the moment and would look forward to working with the author as it moves forward. And we know there'll be a much bigger discussion later on as AB 658, which is a bill that we support, will be in front of this committee today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any other witnesses in opposition to this bill? All right. Senator, could you respond? There were a couple points that were made that I think deserve a response. One is the question that there'll be a lot of liability, potential liability, that there's a loss of immunity here.
There is a law in California called the Good Samaritan Law that exempts people from liability in the case when they get involved in saving somebody's life. So if they attempt to save somebody's life and fail, they're not subject to a lawsuit. There have been no lawsuits in San Diego since this law has been applied, yet they can attribute the saving of lives because this program was put into effect in San Diego. I can't have that same coverage for all of my district, and all the people of my district and the state of California deserve the same kind of preventative, support and the same level of coverage and safety. As you see, very little training is required to operate this device. So the concept that people are going to be going to a university to learn how to operate it, or that lots of time is going to be spent training people is absurd. I think anybody that is serving the public should invest a few minutes in training their staff to respond to a case in an emergency that will serve their customers. It's a good thing to do. And I also want to remind people that this is a prospective measure. It doesn't cover all buildings, but all new construction, new buildings. And yes, they are for high occupancy buildings where 200 people will be present on a continuous basis. On the issue of the state buildings, the state is covered through an executive order. All new construction of state buildings will be covered through an executive order that was issued. In addition to that, the state of California has already moved to create, to cite AEDs in all current facilities through a federal grant that was given for that purpose of public safety in government buildings. So we don't need to write the state into a bill because the state is already handling this issue. They're already covering it. They're already doing everything this bill would do. So I think we cover all the arguments, but the issue really comes down to public safety. Are we gonna do just a little bit more to make a lot of difference in hundreds of people's lives in California? And for that reason, I hope you would support this measure.
Thank you. That's a great close, except I think Senator Hertzberg had a question.
It's really just a comment I think that we should put on the record for this is that, look, I'm going to support your bill, and I think you're right. But I also think in the real world that people bring lawsuits. Somebody's going to have one of these things. They're going to not have a battery. They're going to install it inappropriately. They're going to get sued, and they're going to settle for money. And so in the balance of kind of what we do as public policy makers is you're trying to do this, and certainly you'll save lives. Certainly we know in this whole Good Samaritan law, people have a chilling effect, and they don't want to engage because they're afraid to get involved. They're afraid they might have a problem, even though we have protected them and given them immunity. And so, I only want to give voice to the other side because it is true. People sue all the time, and lawsuits aren't about winning a lawsuit or what the state of the law is. It's about leverage. What's the cost? What's the difficulty of having access to the courts? How long does it take? What impact does it have on my credit rating? Or if I'm in the middle of closing a transaction? That being said, in the balance of things, these things are really cool. They're really important. And if you save a couple of lives, it's certainly worth it. So I support it. But I just think as we debate this, I think it's important to have that kind of practical sense in the discussion. But I certainly will support your measure, sure.
Thank you very much. And Madam Chair, if I could just respond.
Sure, very briefly.
Thank you. Very briefly, it's a balance. It's right. You say if somebody's going to walk into a store with the intent to sue, they're going to find a reason to sue. It can be a crack in the sidewalk. It could be a product that they break and slip on themselves. I mean, there's nothing that you can really do to prevent a lawsuit when somebody has a lawsuit on their mind.
And the beauty of our court system is that we have demurs, we have the opportunity to strike lawsuits that are frivolous, we have courts that are very challenged now and don't want frivolous lawsuits, and we do have a mechanism by which these cases can be thrown out of court. The best we can do, I think, and recognizing that certainly a balance is necessary, is that a lot of the legislation we pass is designed to try to change behavior for the better, to protect the public, to require that people conduct themselves in a way. In this instance here, this bill ensures that the existing immunities will continue to apply, but only where they have maintenance and training and notice requirements are complied with as well. So if we can, within a bill internally, create those protections, change the behavior for the betterment of the public, and at the same time recognize there is always some bad apple, but that the courts are designed to try to avoid or to throw out the frivolous lawsuits, and we can create that balance, and I think this, I personally think this bill does that. We're actually advancing public policy in a positive way.
Permission, can I say one more point? Sitting between the chair of the Judiciary Committee and the chair of the Budget Committee, it takes a year to get a demur heard in the city of Los Angeles, and so the idea that there's going to be justice, we need support for the courts, Mr. Chairman.
I would second that. Senator Wieckowski.
I want to clarify because it seems as though under existing law, because we're lucky today in the Judiciary Committee, we have 2 AED bills that we learn more about it than under existing law. There's a difference between the Good Samaritan, who's some Jane Blow who just walks in the building, and that employee of the building that has under current law. Now, we haven't heard the senator from the peninsula, but it's clear from the staff report that you have to have these machines checked every 30 days, that you have to have an employee that's designated that receives the training, and that you have a whole list of other requirements that have to be done rather than just, and if you don't have that person, then the owner is liable for anything that, goes wrong. That's different from the Good Samaritan. It seems like your statement was like, oh, that doesn't count, but they have to have somebody on site, and the opposition said some of these buildings don't have anybody on site. So what happens in that situation?
Well, it wouldn't apply to a building that doesn't have anybody on site. I mean, that's ludicrous. How do you have a bill with 200 people in it where you don't have anybody on site?
Well, there's
supervise
property
200
manager.
people? Now, I don't, I think in every instance, as we've seen in San Diego, unless somebody can present a business concept to me that has 200 people present at any given moment that doesn't have a staff present, either a manager or a staff person that is aware of where the defibrillator is located, that can't get access to that defibrillator in case of an event. If nobody is present, how can anybody even respond? I mean, the concept is that we put a medical device that would help somebody get access to better health care so that a Good Samaritan can act. Nobody expects that these individuals are going to be trained medical personnel. And you know, as somebody that's well versed on the law, that everything comes back to the intent of the law. The intent is not that they have a medical staff on their staff. It's not part of the intent of the law. And when the courts interpret a law, they look at the intent. All we're simply doing is to allow a Good Samaritan to have a tool that has shown that it can increase the probability of saving somebody's life. That's all we want to do with this measure.
I'm not quibbling with the Good Samaritan. What the current law appears to me is that in order to install this, and everybody's worried about this, the good senator from Los Angeles was about your liability, because people aren't installing these machines now. The reason we have this bill is because people aren't going out and putting them in their private buildings because they're worried about the liability and all the other costs. And it seems as though that this expands it because of the 200-person limit for any new building that goes in. And there's nothing in this bill that changes those liabilities for the property owner. Now, if Mr. Hill's bill passes, I see that that's a different, but
some people do have defibrillators. And there is enough to present enough of a situation that we can measure how many lawsuits have resulted from that. And there have been none.
One. Wow.
And there have been lawsuits that resulted from somebody not having a defibrillator. That's going to happen. That's something that the legislature cannot control. People sue because of the creation of the law, or they sue because of an absence of the law. And there haven't been no lawsuits that we've investigated, no lawsuits that we know of to date, where there is a defibrillator, where people's lives have been saved, or where people's lives haven't been saved that resulted in lawsuits. So we're kind of talking really on the theoretical side. And should this become a problem, I think we can find a way to remedy, but I don't believe in legislating the absence of a problem. We can make California a safer place for Californians, making a very, very small and minimal effort. I think it's worth it.
I have a question on page 5 of the report. You've listed factory buildings, high hazard buildings, and with an occupancy of 200. These are buildings that are built in 2016 that have the capacity to put 200 people in there. Does this bill trigger that requirement of having the AED if they never actually employ? I have a mercantile building that I have 40 people working on. It has the capacity for 200, but it never actually gets it, although it says capacity.
It means capacity.
So if it's built to house 200 people, even though it never gets there, this is triggered.
Again, the intent of the bill is that it be a high occupancy building where people are found in high number on a regular basis. That's the intent of the bill. And we're clearly saying that here at this forum and through this process. So if there's ever a business concept that has a capacity with nobody in there, and they expect not to have anybody in there, and they function in a way that doesn't have anybody in the building, well, they're not required to have a defibrillator.
All right, so thank you, Senator Rakowski. Senator Morlock, you had a question? All right, if we could wrap this up.
For the senator, I think you answered my question, but it exempts state and local government buildings, and you said the state is covered through an executive order. Does that apply to county and city buildings as well, this executive order?
This applies to state buildings. So as far as our jurisdiction extends, we're covering those. I understand that school districts are also doing that with prospective new buildings as well. So this, just to be clear, this is a prospective forward measure. Did you have anything else? So we'll cover all new buildings into the future. So the state is going beyond that.
But the executive order doesn't apply to
as far
local
as the
buildings.
state is, no, it doesn't apply to that.
That was my question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I would just ask that you continue to work with the opposition. There's maybe a tweak here or there, understand the
Absolutely.
principle. And with that, I will assume you've just closed.
I did. Thank you.
And motion by Senator Leno. The motion is due pass to the Senate floor. Again, we have two bills on this subject today, and perhaps we can kind of consider them in that context as the second bill comes up. I think that they may very well complement each other. So due pass to the Senate floor. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Jackson?
Aye.
Jackson, aye. Morlock? Morlock, no. Anderson? Anderson, no. Hertzberg? Hertzberg, aye. Leno? Leno, aye. Monning? Monning, aye. Wykowski?
Okay. 4-2, that bill is out. Thank you very much. And the next bill, Senator Hueso, is SB 328. Colleagues, that is file item 6.
Yes, Madam Chair, SB 328 would require that a licensed pest control professional, no, actually, this would mirror current law where that requires licensed pest control professionals to provide tenants with written notification before a pesticide application. 328 would also apply for any owner of a property in which they have a tenant residing. It would take a precautionary measure to ensure that any tenant is informed that a pesticide will be applied to the property. It will require landlords and property managers to provide tenants with notifications almost identical to those as the Structural Pest Control Act. It's again, it's a public safety issue. It's a simple noticing measure. The notice, the actual notice will be accessible to anyone in the business of, renting housing to the general public. It'll be, the notices will be accessible on the website, and it would simply be a notice to the members of the public. So I hope, again, we can move forward with this important measure.
Thank you, Senator Hueso. First witness.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Brandon Kitagawa. I'm with Regional Asthma Management and Prevention. This is the third year we've partnered with Senator Hueso and the California Association of Code Enforcement Officers to deal with pest infestations because of the significant health impacts associated with such infestations. But however, we also know that the pesticides used to treat those infestations often come with health impacts of their own. So this bill is focused simply on ensuring that tenants are aware of the pesticides that are used where they live by requiring landlords to provide tenants with advance notification about the pesticides used on the property, similar to notifications required of licensed pest control providers. Tenants will have the information they need to avoid unwanted exposure. And this is particularly important to those with respiratory problems such as asthma or other chemical sensitivities. So we request your aye vote to help close a loophole to ensure that tenants have the right to know about the pesticide use on their properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Hello. My name is Leonard Powell. I'm the Community Preservation Manager for the City of Fremont, and I serve on the Board of Directors for the California Association of Code Enforcement Officers, known as CASIO. I'm here today representing CASIO. and we are the premier sponsor, source of professional education for California certified code enforcement officers, and we are proud to be a co-sponsor of SB 328. I also manage housing code enforcement operations for the Bay Area's 4th largest city. I've either supervised or participated in thousands of rental housing inspections. I regularly cause the abatement or correction of substandard housing cases where pest infestation has become a common issue. I've been managing housing code enforcement for 15 years. I also have a law degree, and I'm a certified code enforcement officer by multiple agencies. Prior to my code enforcement career, I worked for over 13 years at a public agency where I was in charge of pesticide use, application, handling, storage, and pesticide sprayer maintenance and calibration. We need SB 328 for the following reasons. There's compelling statewide interest in providing safe rental housing. Pesticides can be toxic to persons if exposed due to improper application. Some people have adverse reactions to exposure to pesticides even when they're correctly applied. And all people are likely to have adverse reactions to misapplication or over-application of pesticides. Current law allows a non-licensed application of pesticides by landlords and their agents in rental housing. This is tantamount to unregulated pesticide applications, since non-licensed applicators are not required to complete any training or demonstrate any competence. Even if products are manufactured and labeled for safe application, that design relies on correct product application. I regularly encounter tenants who claim to have been affected by exposure to pesticides. Since housing inspectors are not doctors, we naturally advise them to see their doctors if they have health concerns. And some tenants call housing inspectors out after consulting with their doctors. It's clear that tenants can be better diagnosed if they have the pesticide product information in hand, since doctors rely on the product labels to help with their diagnosis if exposure is suspected. I have inspected apartments with county vector control officers who are experts in pest management and application. They have pointed out instances of gross misapplication and over-application of pesticides, rendering the products not only ineffective in treating pests, but also overexposing tenants to hazardous levels of pesticide. It appears that sometimes untrained landlords or agents apply successive heavier doses in an attempt to exterminate the pests, rather than engaging in more effective and safer practices. It's also common to see young children present in these cases, who are generally considered to be a sensitive population related to chemical exposure. I also teach landlord-tenant law for Casio. And part
I
of my
don't think,
instruction-
excuse me, I don't think we doubt your credentials at all. Would you just, I'm going to ask you to close, wrap it up, just focusing on
Sure.
why you think we need to, your most persuasive argument on the bill.
Thank you. Well, in conclusion, this is a good bill that should enhance landlord-tenant relations and help provide safer housing with only a minimal impact to landlords. When landlords notify tenants of pest application, they communicate better, and that not only healthier, but it helps all parties concerned.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next witness, very briefly.
Very briefly. John Lovell with the California College and University Police Chiefs Association. It's a good sense bill. Right now, if the landlord uses a licensed pest control operator, he or she has to give notice, okay? Makes sense. All this bill says is if the landlord chooses to do it yourself, you should have the same notice. That's it.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support? If you just give us your name, affiliation, and obviously you are in support of the bill.
Yes, Andrea Ventura with Clean Water Action, obviously in support, and also the Change Coalition, Californians for Healthy and Green Economy, who supports Right to Know About Chemicals.
Thank you.
Nicole Wertelman on behalf of the Alameda County Board of Supervisors in support.
Thank you very much.
Brian Augusta on behalf of Western Center on Law and Poverty in support.
Thank you.
Laura Parr on behalf of the Pest Control Operators of California in support.
Thank you very much. Witnesses in opposition? If you would step forward and if we could make room for these folks. If you're are you in opposition?
Yes, ma'am.
Then you can come on up here and we'll ask these folks to give you a place to sit. Two witnesses, 2 minutes each, if you would.
Jennifer Speck on behalf of the California Association of Realtors. We are in an opposed unless amended position on the bill. In fact, the amendments that we are seeking and to make sure that landlords are not subjected to more onerous requirements than licensed pest control operators. So we will be continuing to work with the author, the sponsors, as well as his staff to assure that those amendments are in place. And I believe that's one of the considerations the author is making.
Much appreciated. I was going to suggest that as well. I don't think that was the intent, is to make them more onerous, but certainly we want to make sure the tenants have notice. Next witness. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Heidi Palutki on behalf of the California Apartment Association. Our position is also oppose unless amended. We don't object to providing the type of disclosure generally that this bill attempts to impose, providing a notice when the owner or manager applies pesticides at the property. However, as written, many of the definitions and provisions are unclear and would be very difficult to comply with. We thank the Senator for his commitment to work with us on amendment language for the bill.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Ron Kingston representing 5 apartment associations, Orange County, Los Angeles, and Bay Area, and the Central Valley. We have been working a great deal with the author and particularly the staff trying to craft out this issue. Here are the deal points that we have been working on. The major issue here is that we have been trying to develop the right approach, applying commercially available pesticides, over the counter, if you will, that you buy at Home Depot, Lowe's, pesticides to the outside area, the common area of rental units, everything from single-family units to single-family 1 to 4 and apartments. They're all very, very different. And to that end, we have been trying to employ and work with the author to identify the practical use, the notice, and the application of these commercially available over-the-counter pesticides. We have been really focusing on how do you apply this, a pesticide that we can buy, and provide notice at the time of application. And we have come to agreement that that can happen simultaneously. We have come to agreement, which is really nice, as to that if someone should remove that notice that we had nothing to do with, that we're not held liable for the removal of that notice. And finally, we have been discussing what do we do with repetitive use of the same brand, let's say, for example, you go out and buy a systemic Rose Care product, which is a fertilizer and a pesticide, and you use once a month. Do you have to continually post the notice in the same property? And the answer by the author and us is no. One notice should be satisfactory. Once the tenant receives that notice, if it's a Rose Care product, for example, that is deemed adequate. And for those types of reasons, we would ask the committee to approve the bill because we have made substantial progress, and there has been really great progress that we've made and have more to come.
Thank you very much. Last witness, please, here.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Carrie Mazzoni for the Educational Community of Homeowners representing Common Interest Developments in California. We haven't opposed unless amended, and will continue to work with the author.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in opposition? All right, any questions from the members? I would like to thank the author for his willingness to work with the concerns of the opposition. And again, this is a notice request. We want to make sure that people can take the necessary steps if applications of pesticides are about to occur. We know that they can have very deleterious health effects, and having that notice and the ability to take appropriate steps, I think, is something that we all agree on, and appreciate your willingness to do that. So seeing no questions, Senator Wojtkowski moves the bill. Senator Hueso, if you would like to close.
Just simply, that's the beauty of the public process, Madam Chair, getting everybody involved and working to protect the public's health. We'll get there into a bill that addresses the concerns, some valid concerns were brought up through this process, and we'll work with them to ensure everybody is made whole.
Excellent. Thank you. The motion is due pass to the Senate floor. Madam Secretary, please call the roll. We have a motion from Senator Wojtkowski.
Jackson?
Aye.
Jackson, aye. Morlock? Morlock, no. Anderson? Anderson, no. Hertzberg?
Aye.
Hertzberg, aye. Leno? Leno, aye. Monning? Monning, aye. Wojtkowski? Wojtkowski, aye.
All right, 5-2, that bill is out. I would like to ask your indulgence, Senator Hueso, you have a final bill up. I think that will take a little more than 15 minutes,